Hello there, this is Richard and Jane Denning from Medusa Games. We're glad to be with you here today. What we're going to be looking at today is a couple of things. We're going to be looking back a week or so ago to Virtually Expo that was on the weekend before this one, and thinking about virtual cons and what that might mean for the future. So to start with, I should give some overall explanation about what was Virtually Expo in case you're coming at this entirely afresh. First of all, I should, for sake of transparency, just say that I also run UK Games Expo and Virtually Expo, as well as Medusa Games, and so I think that obviously gives me both basically something of a unique perspective on this process of what happened last weekend and what might happen in the future with these events. Anyway, with Virtually Expo, what it was a virtual online show. We tried to take as much of the real world show as possible and put it into an online version. So to do that, we basically converted the website, the UK Games Expo website. There was a lot of coding work that went into that. It converted across the whole front page into a place that housed streams and entrances, portals if you like, to get you into the trade hall, to get you into the event listings, and also to get you into the community areas of the show. So the trade hall was done via a graphical representation with some quite fun artwork to give you the feel of being at a convention, and then individual exhibitor stands, which when you clicked on them went into an exhibitor stands. There's loads of videos out there now of how that all looked, including on Medusa Games' own YouTube channel. The community aspect of the Virtually Expo was done via Discord, where we made a lot of use of the Discord channels, fun entertainment type activities, as well as information sources and question and answer and support services. And we also had the event listings. There are over 900 events of all sorts, from role-playing games to tournaments to streams by exhibitors and by our own streams, and playtest sessions and all sorts of other activities. So as much as possible of the real con was brought into that. Now, when we set the event up, we said to ourselves we would be fairly happy if we had perhaps somewhere in the region of 5,000 or so people coming anywhere near the show, of which maybe a couple of thousand or so would be engaged. Actually, we believe there were over 20,000 people came to the website and engaged in some fashion, of which 5,000 or so were more involved, more engaged. So from a numbers point of view, we were pretty happy with that. So anyway, let's have a look at what that meant in terms of reflecting on it from the perspective of actually being a publisher. So Jane.
Okay, so normally when you're going to a convention, you obviously plan in advance what you're going to do with your stand, what stock you're going to take, and on all those things, and that's often quite difficult because from one convention to the next, some people buy certain games and other games are more popular, so it's always difficult to know quite what proportions to use for that. However, this was a virtual thing, so none of that applied. Obviously we have all our stock available, and it's not like anybody would be buying a game and walking off with it there and then. They'd be ordering via our website and we'd be posting it out. So all of those concerns weren't there, but there was the matter of the stand. So the way that Virtually Expo was set up, traders had a variety of different ways in which they could engage with the public. One of the ways that they could engage was a chat button where people could click on a chat, and this idea behind this was that for people who had no knowledge of Discord or any similar programs, they didn't need to have any particular software loaded. Just click on the chat button and it would come through to us and you'd be able to see the stand. So we set basically a stand up in our front room. We used my piano as a stand for putting some games on as a backdrop, and we laid everything out. And we had just an iPad that was tuned in to that chat window. Now, I must admit that actually that was one way of engaging with us that people just didn't seem to use at all at the show, But we didn't know that in advance, and so we set everything up in order to look like that, and Richard's showing you there what it was. You'll also see that on the table we had laid out one of our card games, Tinker Tailor. For the purpose of the show in advance, we had put all of our games on Tabletopia, which is a sort of sandbox environment where publishers can upload all the artwork, all the components of various parts of a game, that you then do it electronically and manipulate the pieces there. But we wondered how well that would work, and so we also decided to have a couple of physical games set out that we could potentially talk through just by pointing a camera at them. So on the stand we had a Tinker Tailor, and on the kitchen table we had a 9 Worlds set out to play. Again, these were not things we needed to use at a show, but it was potentially there. Then, of course, we needed large numbers of computers and equipment for manning the event. So in our back room, we had set up some computers to be used for streaming things out, which we did at various points in the show, and also showing videos afterwards. And then there were a combination of laptops and desktop computers on which we were going to use the Discord channel to talk to people, and then Tabletopia in order to demo games electronically. And one of our live streams was actually of a physical game of Tinker Tailor being played out. So we're just looking there. That was done from the upstairs our games room. So you can see we've laid out Tinker Tailor there. And there's also the various computers geared up, ready to do that production. So yes, in the same way that in the real world, my ordinary job no longer involves me going into the office, but instead I do everything from the spare bedroom. The convention was run from our kitchen, our back room, our front room and our spare bedroom. But of course, that is the way of the world at the moment, and we aren't the only people that are doing things in that way.
Yep, so for the weekend we had a team with us. We had ourselves. Now, of course, I was also running the Virtually Expo, so I was only really around on the Medusa side around about half the time. That was a bit more often than I would be at a normal UK Games Expo, where I don't really get anywhere near the stand. So that was actually quite refreshing for a change. But we also had my daughter and her boyfriend and with us here at the house, as they've been for most of the lockdown period, and remotely from Nottingham, Gemma, who's one of our demonstrators. My son Matthew also helped us by running some of the streams, handling the sort of technical aspect of that. So basically we had 5 or 6 people in all, for varying lengths of time over those sort of 48 hours. Now we also made use of Discord, so if I pop back over here and show you that, this is our Discord channel on that we used, and we had a number of channels in here. We had a welcome channel, which first of all welcomed people to the expo, to our stand rather, and gave them information about what they needed to do in order to get demos. This has been edited since last weekend, but it did explain to people how they could get demos. There was a general chat channel which was pretty heavily used, and quite a lot of engagement there, as you can see, back and forth conversations and discussions and chats, and people saying hello and arranging demos. So this is where they first came into and first asked for the demonstration. We had, and then what we would then do is we would transfer people to one of our demo channels, of which at one point we ended up running 4. We had 4 demo channels open, because I think we had use of all 4, although most of the time it would be 1 or 2 demos that we were actually running through the weekend. And in these demo channels we were able to talk to people or on the audio, and we were able to use it to exchange with Tabletopia links here for them to get them into the Tabletopia game. We also had a few private staff channels, which were very useful when we came to doing the streaming, so that we could have conversations amongst ourselves offline, as it were, while the stream was going on. If there were some questions or problems, that could come up there. And we also had a shop channel, just listing the prices of our shops. Apart from the use of of Discord. We made use of Twitch. We streamed on Twitch 5 times during the show, as well as I was on a stream on main stage as well. These videos have since been uploaded onto YouTube, so that they'll hopefully be seen afterwards. That was how we basically ran Medusa Games last weekend. So the question really is, what level of engagement did we have with that?
Yes, it's interesting because, of course, at an ordinary convention, you are standing at your stand and you can see people coming towards you. You can see the person that's working their way along all of the stands that have role-playing games, for instance, so you're not particularly expecting they'll show much interest in you. You can see the family groups. You can see the person who seems to be very much geared towards heading to one particular place, and the people who are just drifting slowly along. So you try to make eye contact and engage in people, and then if they come over, you can talk to them. Now, of course, in a virtual environment, it's very different to that. So when people actually click through to our Discord channel, then we would know they were there, and you'd say hello, or send a message hello, but a lot of the time you wouldn't actually get anything back from them, because of course a lot of people would have entered the server, immediately seen where the shop was, clicked on the website, and that would be it. And there's no way of knowing that when you're actually manning a stand. Whereas other people come along and they ask about when's the next demo available, or that sort of thing. The other interesting thing, of course, was that on the one hand, you don't have people in front of you, so you can't do anything to entice them in. But on the other hand, some of the people who actually do demos are from a much wider section than you would normally get. I would say at least half of the people that had demos said that they'd never actually attended UK Games Expo or any other sort of physical convention. Or there's one person who said that they had done so in the past, but when it got bigger, they felt that it was too intimidating, whereas online they were happy to once again do that. On the other hand, I also did one demonstration game with somebody who was actually at work on an offshore oil rig. So clearly, we said he'd been to Essen, and he'd already go to Essen, and this year he was planning on going to Expo. Obviously, he couldn't do that, but he tuned in, and the telephone lines held out, and we managed an hour and a half demo of 2-player Great Fire. So yes, it's interesting. I mean, overall, there were fewer people that we directly interacted with. But the variety of people was probably somewhat greater than you would get at a physical convention.
Yes, I think it is different, and I think there are. I mean, we've got down some sort of stats on things that a good 60 odd people came somewhere near the Discord server. We had demos. We had a good amount of interaction with about 20 or so of those, of 10 sort of actual direct demonstrations. The streams that we ran. There was quite a lot of views of the streams, not necessarily always live, but sometimes afterwards or sometimes on YouTube. Particularly, what we found worked pretty well were the videos that we'd done in advance of Virtually Expo, which we'd put on the website, such as all our games in 5 minutes or less, or individual games in 8 minutes or less. And we found that they were. I mean, the 5 minutes or less one was actually viewed 50 odd times.
In terms of the live streams, a lot of the time people weren't watching them live. The one exception to that was the one that you did with on Tabletop, not on Medusa Games' own Twitch channel, but on the Expo main stage one, which had a much larger audience for that. So probably
6,800, 70 odd sort of views at a peak. So that was obviously got a lot of reasonable amounts of attention at the time, and a lot of those streams would get sometimes several hundred people connecting up with it. So I think it's a different way of doing things. I think a lot of people there's a certain extent to which people are more likely to be sort of a little bit more passive engagement of the show, so watching the streams than necessarily coming through to the demos. Now this might be something that improves over time, because there is that. I mean, there are some limitations to this sort of type of event. So, both from the point of view of a visitor, there are certain hurdles they've got to overcome. It's actually quite easy just to go to the website and watch the streams. That doesn't require pretty much any sort of a level of technical ability other than just getting the website up. But once you start putting in extra levels, such as going through to the Discord and then going on to Tabletopia or other Tabletop Simulator or anything like that, then obviously you're now starting to narrow the group of people. So, whilst there was thought to be 20,000 plus people at Virtually Expo, perhaps only 5,000 people got through to those sorts of engagement levels like that, which obviously would have reflect therefore how many people were willing or get into a demonstration. Now that might improve with time if virtual shows going forward are with us for a bit of a time yet. I suspect people will get better. Well, there are a lot of people who said to us, this is the first time they've used Tabletopia. This is the first time they've probably been anywhere near Discord. And we're not necessarily talking about sort of older people. It could be often it's quite young people who.
Well, let's face it. When was the last time? I mean, I hadn't heard of Tabletopia 6 or 7 months ago.
No. No, I hadn't heard of Tabletopia at the beginning of March. I hadn't used Board Game Arena or Tabletopia. I'd heard of Tabletop Simulator, but only loosely, not in any detail. I hadn't used Discord. I hadn't used really Twitch. I hadn't used Zoom. I'd used Skype a few times. But so in that time period, we've become a lot more knowledgeable about all of that, and a lot of people have. But there's still a lot of people that haven't, and I think that those challenges are there to some extent. Now, as a result of that, I think there are also challenges in terms of what you can expect out of a virtual event in terms of sales levels as a publisher. It's not likely that it's not likely you get anywhere near what you would sell at a real world convention. Figures are around about 10 or 20% are probably more realistic. There isn't that spontaneity you see in a real world convention where you see all this stuff around you. People go with a wallet full of money because they're saving up and they want to go and buy all these things, and that doesn't apply to the same extent with a virtual convention. You can't have that spontaneous sort of buy when you see something that you weren't expecting to see. That doesn't tend to happen to the same extent.
It's really a lot like online shopping.
Yes.
We're all very used to that, but generally speaking, if you do an online supermarket order, you're far less likely to add in much in the way of impulse buying.
Yes.
You might you might search for something and happen to see something else that comes up on the same page and think, oh, I'll have one of those as well. But it's a lot less likely than when you're going around the shelves.
Yes,
and I think that was the case again. The other point is that because people can't actually physically take the thing away with them, there is no real incentive to buy right then. So the sales were a lot lower, but it's going to be weeks, probably months even, before we can really tell to what extent that's made a difference. On the other hand, I mean, when you're attending a convention as an exhibitor, there are two things you're looking for. One thing is sales, and the other thing is just how busy are you? Are your demo teams sitting around twiddling their thumbs? Are people coming over? Are you engaging with the public and learning about games and so on? And I would say that, given we only had a smaller staff, there were a couple of times when things got quiet, but then again that always happens. But certainly Friday evening, the vast bulk of Saturday, was pretty busy most of the time. Sunday was a lot quieter, but given that we only had the capacity to run 2 or 3 demos at a time, there were a couple of occasions when I was worried we might run out of capacity. We didn't, but we nearly did, and certainly we were pretty busy on those days. So the engagement levels were high, the sales less so, but
yes, there were. I think given the environment we were in, I think they were certainly acceptable sort of levels of engagement, weren't there? And I think that hopefully would get better in the future with people getting used to this sort of environment. Of course, the other flip side of all of this is that costs are so much less of doing things with a virtual con. People are in their own houses, so you haven't got to think about hotel rooms. You're not going to bother about convention food, which is often expensive and difficult to get, and you don't have to think about travel. and of course stand fees. Expo didn't charge stand fees apart from entirely new exhibitors. Anyone that had a stand this year at virtually at the Real World Con should have been. We rolled that over into the virtual con, but so obviously cost-wise it was an awful lot less.
Yeah, but
people.
even so, I mean, for the new people as well, the levels were pretty low.
Oh,
so
yes.
stand fees were much more sort of starter stand rate for everybody, as it were.
What do you call the sponsorships and things?
I mean, the next big con in the calendar is obviously Essen in October, which again is going to be a virtual event, as it's got to be, because all large events in Germany have been banned till the end of the year at the earliest. And there, again, the costs that they're charging for their trade stands are higher than Expo. I mean, in the real world, you would normally expect to have more substantial sales at Essen, just because Essen is essentially an enormous trade hall and people go there very much to buy, whereas people go to Expo for a variety of things, as they go to Gen Con for events and other matters. At Essen, people are going for shopping and for demonstrations. But even that said, yes, the trade stand is maybe 4 times the cost of an Expo virtual stand, but it's still all those other costs that we normally have. Travel to Germany, hotel costs, etc., having to pay demonstrators and so on for much longer time periods. So yes, it's a much the costs are so much less all around. The whole budget for both exhibitors and for organisers is less, and the public sales are also less, and it's whether those things can be sufficiently in line to make them still worthwhile.
But anyway, looking to the future then, what does all this mean for next year? This year clearly is effectively a wipeout in terms of conventions. So we got to Aircon in March, just a few days before lockdown started, and that was certainly a considerable doubt at some point that was going to happen, but it did. But basically, it was the last significant event. Unlikely that there'll be a physical real world show this year of any sort. I think there's some speculation or discussions about things like Dragon Meet, but I think those are still I think probably mostly unlikely. I think from what I understand. I don't think they made an announcement about that. I think we're really looking to 2021, and then the question on everyone's mind, of course, is what is that? Will there be a vaccine? If there's a vaccine, then we can run a real world show. So we're sniffling here. I seem to have got some sort of like convention lurgy, even though we're not been at a convention. That's possible.
First time you've got anything like a cold this year.
So yes, we. But yes, we. So what are we looking ahead to the 2021? Assuming there is a vaccine, then we are obviously as UK Games Expo planning to do the show in the beginning of June. If there isn't a vaccine, then we must look to the
virtual world, one way or another. I mean, there has been a couple of things. I think in China they've had different types of trade conventions where they've done a sort of hybrid thing with having Chinese attendees only, but international stuff all being done virtually. And you could certainly imagine a world where there is no vaccine as such, but other measures are in place so that it's possible to have localized or national events, but international travel is still very much not available. And then it would be a question of what you then did. I mean, having a mix is difficult.
Very difficult. I think the problem is, as we said, Tony and I did an interview on the Sunday of Virtually Expo, and we said the issue is the finances of all of this. Now, obviously, we did the expo with not charging anyone much for it, apart from the sponsors and the new exhibitors. Clearly, that as a financial model, and with free entry for all the visitors, that as a financial model isn't the way that we can run a company going forward long term. But equally, we're aware, obviously, the exhibitors will need to make their own minds up about what level of spending is something that we wanted to contemplate for these sorts of conventions.
Yes, I
So
think
that,
it'll be very interesting, won't it, to see how Essen goes from that point of view, because
yes,
that, as I say, is very much about trade sales, and that's the driving factor. So
Yes.
whereas we said that we got a lot of useful engagement with the public in other ways at Expo, you would expect less of that at Essen. It will be more sales driven. So it will be very interesting to see how that goes, and whether the public can be persuaded in sufficient numbers to turn up and actually spend money in the virtual environment. Because if that can be achieved, it obviously makes it much easier to come up with a viable virtual experience. If it can't be achieved, then having some sort of entrance fee, in order, if the main thing people are going to do is watch streams and so on, that's fine, but then people are going to need to actually pay something in order to access those streams.
So this is something which will be on our mind in coming weeks and months, as we keep an eye open on the news for vaccines, but also I start thinking about the finances of a virtual show. But that's looking at it from an Expo's point of view. From a Medusa's point of view, we obviously have to take some steps in order to get ourselves ready for a 2021, which might have more virtual stuff going on than the real world stuff, or some mixture in between.
Yes, and of course, regardless of what happens with conventions, the one thing that the whole virtual world has done for us is it's meant that we now have a lot more content on our website that we've created, and we now have all of our games available on Tabletopia, which means that you really can try before you buy in the way that you'd normally do by going into a game shop or going to a convention, and that's just not possible in the current climate.
No, so I think that leaves opportunities for play testing and for showing people games during this sort of time period. And I think that ourselves, along with lots of other publishers, will probably be getting better and more experience with the use of all this virtual sort of technology, whether that be Twitch or Discord or any of these other things.
And for developing new games as well. I mean, we'll be talking later in the coming weeks, doing a little bit more on the pros and cons of Tabletopia and other electronic methods of playing games. But it does open up the possibility for play testing with people from different countries or from different parts of the country, from getting in teams of people who might be interested in being part of the development in a way that in the past we've had to physically go around, find people, post things out to them, and not been able to interact with them very directly. You could actually have a playtest session where you were taking part along with a group in Essex or wherever it might be.
Yes, indeed. So I think we're going to wrap things up there. Looking ahead, I think we will indeed be looking at our games now that are on Tabletopia. We can talk a bit about that process, and again, we've done videos on this before, but I think for some publishers it's very much a new environment, and so we'll talk further about that. But also,
and we've done those videos were done from the point of view of the publisher, obviously from the point of view of just people as well, using it to play not just our games but other people's games. There's a lot of things out there. A lot of people are still feeling very sort of bored and lonely and trapped. Who knows if there'll be a second wave, local lockdowns or whatever, and different things in different parts of the world. So ways that we can still connect, still come together, still play games and still have a bit of fun. It's good to know.
So that's where we are for the moment. So if you have any further questions, by all means, fire off some questions to us at Medusa Games. So it's Richard at medusagames.co.uk or Jane at medusagames.co.uk, and we'll get back to you if you want to perhaps be involved in play testing. Either email us or come to our Discord server. You can access that from the medusagames.co.uk website, and we will get you into a play test.
Leave us a message on our general channel, and then we can potentially come back to you and let you know when we're next be in a position to run demos and so on.
Okay, well, good night, and thanks for watching.
Good night.